Hi, and welcome back to your Daily Market podcast. My name is MaryKlaire Pelk, and I am your host. I'm the Director of Operations for the GCU Finance and Econ Club. I'm here with Charlie Hurst and Karol Krzyszton. Why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm also a director of operations and for the finance club, and I'm a freshman.
I'm Karol Krzyszton, and I'm part of the finance club, and I'm also a freshman.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. As per usual, I'm going to give a quick overview of the market, and then today we're going to be talking about credit cards and how they work specifically for college students. So taking a look at the market for today, the S&P was down 0.39%, the Dow was up 0.11%, the NASDAQ was down 0.73%, and oil prices are currently sitting at almost $105 a barrel. So let's talk about it. What happened today?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that, the oil prices, has to follow after Iran. Their leader tried to talk to President Trump about what they want for a peace deal in the negotiations, and President Trump struck back and said that it was totally out of context and that he didn't want like anything to do with their deal that they had because it's crazy. But that was like the main thing that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
And the bounce off of that is that the ball is in Trump's court right now when it comes to the Iran situation, because he can be very passive, try to do a peace talk right now, or be more aggressive, wait it out for a couple of months, or like potentially a more escalation, which I doubt. However, since the ball's in his court and people don't really understand what's going on, so that's why things are more like going up and going down. And what I see is that energy companies are actually winning here because they're having so much more demand. People are having nervous, oh, we have to get some oil now, we have to do this, we have to get more energy. And they're benefiting from this. While more riskier options, not riskier, but like more non-traditional options and like tech companies are struggling from the Iran war because people like are more focused elsewhere instead of them.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I know me and Jaron talked about like a rotation in like the sectors of the market. So obviously people might be rotating their money out of like the technology sector and putting it into the energy sector. That's what we talked about.
Yeah, especially during times of volatility where nobody knows where this is heading. And with technology being on the rise for so long as well, it has been about time for things to be switching up a little bit, specifically with the volatility going on. Within the U.S., we have had some news of the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell talking about concerns in the rising energy prices and inflation. So that begs the question of where you guys think the market may be headed. There's talk of recession. There's talk of hard landing, soft landing. How does that work for you guys?
Yeah, so obviously every time the Fed chair speaks, obviously it's Jerome Powell right now. That has a lot of weight on the market, and typically you see it start to get really volatile when he's speaking, whether he says like a certain word or the tone of his voice. A lot of investors look at that in the short term time, so a lot of day traders are looking at that, but it still makes an impact. Whether like his tone is off or like he sounds scared or whatever, but people take that and they make investment choices off of that. So yeah, I think that's like obviously a high impact thing. But to go off what you're saying, I think if Jerome Powell is talking about energy prices being concerned, obviously they're a concern because these are the people that are running the economy for the whole U.S. and what they're saying means a lot for the average investor.
Like I said earlier, how the ball's in Trump's court, because Powell can't really give a good like explanation of what's going on. We have to wait like a week or two to what Trump is doing to get like a good answer, whether he's being neutral, passive, or being more aggressive. And this can like affect the economy, like because everyone's looking what's going on to, and Powell's like the main guy. Someone has to say what's like, going on from the government POV, and all the news lines headlines are oil, oil, oil. That's what everyone's looking at because all the majority of the world's oil is coming from the Herman Strait, from like Kuwait, Dubai, Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. All those have to go through a narrow strait that is being controlled by Iran. Like it's being like extremely like bogged down in that strait. And overall in the global economy, this affects Asia way more since all the refineries in Asia are based off Middle East oil because it's sour, it's heavy oil that all the refineries in like Japan, China are used to. Well, and Europe is also being affected by this. They have more like leeway because they have their own mild sources of natural gases, but they're also being affected because they're getting a lot of oil from the Middle East. The US also gets a lot of oil from the Middle East. Prices here are going up to like $105.39 per barrel for the US, but we get most of our oils, like our refineries are for Alberta, Canada, Mexico, and Alaska, how it's used to. But we're still getting like affected because the Hormuz Strait is just so vital, and it's like I said earlier, is being bogged down from all these effects. However, like most nations in the world are planning to use the reserves just because it's gonna not be long term. This war with Iran is not a long term thing, so they're using the reserves, the strategic reserves, and this is gonna affect mostly China because China has the biggest reserves, but they also have the biggest like demand for oil. The U.S. has their reserves, but they also have their potential to have in the next 3 years have as same amount production of oil increase as Dubai. And however, like the biggest winner in this like bad scenario of like the oil prices going up is Japan because they have per capita the best oil reserves per like usage rate, and they have the longest of like just camping this out before like any good or bad things happening to economies.
Yeah, definitely. I read somewhere that the oil prices are the highest they've been since 2022, which is certainly crazy. But as you were saying, Charlie, these things that Jerome Powell mentions and the volatility in the war right now seem to affect the market a lot in the short term. However, for those of us who have money in more long-term investments, who choose to invest in more long-term compounding growth options, how will this affect in the long term?
Yeah, I'd say like one of the main things that I don't like to do is look at my like long-term account, because if you are attached to those numbers, then you're obviously going to be scared, you're going to be excited, or you're just going to like be watching it 24/7. A long-term account is meant to be there for 10 years plus, and it's stuff like this where maybe it lasts a year. In the grand scheme of things, it's not going to matter in 10 years because the market historically obviously goes up over a course of 50 to 100 years. It has the average. But I think if you're attached to those numbers, you're going to be really scared about your money and you're not going to want to invest. So I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that because like we might be facing a correction coming up because how the economy is looking at, but the Iran situation, it's gonna probably affect the economy for a while, maybe like 6 months max. But your long-term investments are not going to be affected too much by this.
Yeah, and to bounce off of that, the NASDAQ is facing a correction right now because it is down past that 10% mark. We talked about correction.
Yeah, do you want to explain again what that means?
Yeah, so a correction would be when an index faces a 10% to 20% drop in between that range. And if it goes below 20, then it's a bear market, which means that the market is in a trend that favors it going down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So overall, all of these things in the economy lead to high amounts of inflation, which affects the Fed rates and what Jerome Powell is going to do, which brings us on to our topic of discussion for today, being credit cards and how all that is affected. It is known that the current rates of the Federal Reserve affect APR of credit cards and everything that has to do with that. Why don't you give us a quick explanation of that?
Credit cards are your average percent rates for like when I buy something on a credit, I'm taking money out of the bank. The bank pays first and I pay them back. And if I don't pay that in time, I get like a fine or I get a rate for it. And that's the rate, and the Fed affects that rates. So if the rates are going up right now, and I just paid something with credit $1,000, and I'm getting my interest, I have to pay whatever that is. Maybe it'd be like a 3.5 right now. So it'll be $35. I think that's the right rate. And this is like one of those things, the more money you take out, the more it's affecting you. That's why, like, yeah, it's only 3.5. It doesn't matter too much as a college kids. We're working with only $100 or $3 at a time with interest rates. But bigger loans for like houses, this affects them, especially like, yeah, like the more you spend, the more you're affected by the rates.
Yeah. So for someone who's in college and who has never had a credit card before, what actually is it? How does it work? What's the benefits, drawbacks, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so like the basic thing of a credit card is you're not actually paying with cash. So compared to a debit card where you're paying straight from your checking account, because it's linked to that, a credit card instead is, I'm pretty sure there's a certain amount that your bank lets you spend a month, and you can just go, like, say you're going to Starbucks and you pay $10 for a drink, you tap your credit card, you're not going to instantly lose that money. But at the end of the month, however much money you spent on that credit card, you'll get a note from a note from the bank telling you how much you owe them, and then you pay it back at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And for like the more common, for like for Chase, the college cards for like beginners, you have like a $500 limit, and it's more forgiving. Like the rates are more forgiving, but you have like less rewards using the cards, and it's more incentive of just like buying what you need and like paying it back later. Like it's less of a worry than the beginner cards for college kids.
Yeah, definitely. But it is still so important to be able that you can pay back exactly what charges you're putting on that card. I do hear a lot that getting a credit card this early in your life, specifically as a college student, can help a lot in the future, especially when it comes to buying a house, buying a car. How does that work? What's the logic there?
Yeah, so there's this thing called a credit score. And every time you pay back at the end of the month, it builds up your reliability that you're paying back this money to the bank. And if you don't miss a payment over time, when you're like 40, 50 years old and you want to go buy a house, they'll let you take out like a bigger loan. They'll be more forgiving to you and let you have more benefits.
Bounce off of that, banks look at things like all aspects of how you're using their credit cards. Even if you're only using $300 of your limit, I have 500, it still looks at you. You're using 60% of your credit, and that affects you negatively because you're using more of the credit. But a lot of aspects of that affects how the banks look at you. Because at the short term, my reward of using credit, spending it every other week with my debit, I'm acting like if my credit card's my debit card. But my reward short term is that if my credit score is high enough, I can get a travels card. And I have a lot of family in Europe, so I have to travel there. And the biggest hassle is not the traveling part, but it's the currency exchange. For if you go to a vendor, it might even be at like 5%. It took me, last time I went, 6 hours to find a vendor that was generally not a scam to transfer my money. So we'll get a travel card from Chase Bank. You have zero international fees with travel, with like currency exchange.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different options for anybody who has never had a credit card before, maybe is looking into getting their first ones. Is there some that you guys know of that you might recommend, or ones that you use that you find to be beneficial, starter cards, anything like that?
For me, I personally I affiliate with Chase Bank, and Chase Unlimited Freedom Card is the most just as simple as you can get. You have mild rewards, but it's only focused on your limit of $500, which from their starter college card is $500, but now I have access to $1,000, and it's just the most generic. There's like not a lot to worry about, but there's no annual fees. It's just a card that you can spend right now with money from the bank that you pay later. I recommend Chase if you're looking for a college kids card.
Yeah. Any from you, Charlie?
I personally do not own a credit card, so I can't really speak on that.
Interesting. Any input as to why?
I think one of the main benefits of having a credit card, if I had a job right now, I probably would have a credit card. But I'm also not going and spending, like, I don't have a car, so I'm not going off campus and spending money with like a debit card or something. Yeah, I do some activities, but I pay debit with that. But I think if you have a job, a credit card is important because you're going to be getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. So you can spend that money on your credit card throughout that 2 week time frame, and then you'll have the money to pay back at the end of the month once you get your paycheck after 2 weeks.
And to go over that, like why someone may not have a credit card is that I personally wouldn't recommend having a credit card if you're spending too much in your income, like you're spending close to your income with very little room, like buffer space. Because if you do mess up, like I have a short-term goal that I'm trying to get my travel card by summer because I'm going back for a wedding in Poland. However, if I do bad, if I miss a payment and you're looking at like how much credit I'm using and I don't get accepted, it will affect me like long term. And for kids, most kids are not disciplined or smart,
Yeah.
to put it that way. But mistakes happen. Sometimes you miss a payment or miss it too, or you just become too you're thinking like, oh, this is just free money. It's not my money because it's the bank's money, and
Yeah.
you overspend it. You overspend what you can pay back.
Yeah, it's certainly important to do your research and stay on top of things whenever you look into borrowing money. Overall, I believe this wraps up our daily market podcast. I hope you have something to take away.